Spacehaven may look like a simple colony sim, but it has its depths and complexity, which prevents a lot of people to get into the mid-game. Hello Spacefarers, Dragot here, giving you the complete guide on how to manage a lot of aspects of the game for a successful playthrough. Let's start with combat. First you have to give guns to your crew. To do that, draft a crew member, click on a storage unit that has guns in it, and then select the pickup option. The crew member will walk over there, and then a window will appear in which you can assign a weapon to the crew member. The small alien critters can't bridge gaps in the floor, so dock at breaches. The bigger alien haulers have a different attack pattern. They are charging a crew member, and as long as there is a path to that crew member, they are going to pursue it. So what you want to do when a crew member gets charged is pick that crew member, move it away from the hauler so it can't use its melee attacks, and let the rest of your crew do the damage to kill it. When fighting enemy crew, move as a pack. Not only do you get the advantageous 4 versus 1 situations more often, you also can use spacebar to pause and resume the game, and use this to reposition your party members individually to shield the already wounded with more healthier crewmates. Use the highest accuracy shooters with assault rifles or SMGs to pick enemies from a distance. Don't forget to undraft crew members or shuttles when done. Next, some general tips. Only produce what you need. This will save you storage space and also will keep the amount of general tasks and logistic tasks low. Okay, so let's talk about proper nutrition for your crew. The algae dispenser I'm not a big fan of because it also gives your crew toxins, and those make them feel bad and not being too productive. So I want to get the maximum, so that's why we need to properly set up our kitchen. 2 recommendations here. First would be an 11999, but my personal favorite is the 111378. Either way, you need to make sure that you have green numbers on the bottom line all the way. This example eventually also shows that you should make yourself comfortable with using the entire UI, like every placeable structure, all the overlays, all the menus, settings and all that stuff. Time for tips on trading. You can buy what they have 2 figures of, and to make credits you should consider producing and selling either fabrics, hyperfuel or plastics. In case of an emergency, pause the game. Click the associated facility, select the Jobs tab, and then assign a crew member to do this job. You are in control over the Jobs tab of every facility or every job that is available on your ship. You just have either to select the breach or the facility or whatever, and then assign a crew member to do it right now. Salvage all those claimable derelict ships because they are a very good source of tech and energy blocks in the early game. Always provide seating in your research area, because sometimes those guys just need a rest and you don't want them to wander off to the other end of the ship just then to wander back to return to your research lab. Big part of the early game is the so-called energiumhunt. So there are 3 ways to obtain energium to keep your ship running. First, of course, you can mine it. Second, you can find it on derelict ships. And third, you should recycle energy scrap, because every 6 energy scrap will yield 1 energium crystal. I've made an entire tutorial about power in Spacehaven, which I'll link at the end of the video, but now I would like to show you a little trick on how to get the most out of your solar panels. This is pretty much 3 times the same setup. We want to get the most power from our charge capacity nodes at the lower end of the screen to the corresponding power capacity node on the upper end of the screen. The only difference is the linkage, and in the case of the one to the right, the additional power consumption thing. But as you may already identify, the setup on the right is the most effective to shove power through our system into the upper power capacity node. After we've checked the numbers, this is the setup I would recommend to drain your solar panels entirely, so your generators have to produce as less power as possible. This is how you start a new ship. If you are playing the abandoned mining station, you can remove that ship and from here pick a new shape, for example like that, and add this as your new to build ship. Always make sure that your mass is lower than your thrust to make sure that you use your fuel most effectively. Gas scrubbers and CO2 producers can coexist peacefully without affecting each other. Doors are also vents. They will spread the atmosphere through your ship. In case of an emergency, close those vents to prevent your ship from losing its entire atmosphere. Walls are good to block out bad environment effects. Build comfortable zones using furniture, food-related facilities, and jukebox arcade machines. Now comes the big one. I hope we all agree that this is the most valuable resource in the game, the time our crew has during the day. We want our crew to utilize as much of this on productive tasks and as few of this time on carrying stuff around. To achieve this, we need to optimize our logistics. This is also the reason for the rule not to overproduce. The amount of tasks generated depends on the amount of facilities which want to be operated and the tasks they require or generate. The time a logistic task requires depends on the traveled distance, which means in return that we should reduce the distance between a storage unit delivering stuff to a facility and the path from a facility to put the produced items into the next storage unit. So the placement of storage units is crucial. You definitely want to put one storage unit next to your airlocks because those can be overwhelmed. And to prevent this, you want to get all that stuff that comes through the airlocks to be stored right away. It also makes sense to have a storage unit in your medical bay. Just make sure it demands just the IV fluids and the medical supplies and refuses to take anything else. Actually, only the storage units next to your airlock should be catch-alls. All the others should demand certain items and refuse all the others. Now the interesting question is where to put industry. As our hyperdrives are at the back of the ship, we probably want a storage there for Hyperium or hyperfuel. Since we now have the storage there, probably the refinery should be in close proximity. But the refinery also turns energium into energy rods, so probably we should use the storage to store those too, and then add a generator in close proximity. Later in the game, the optronics fabricator would also utilize the energy rods, so probably that should be close there as well. Another thing the optronics fabricator definitely needs are electronic components. Those are coming from the recycler and the metal refinery, which require all the scrap material, carbon and the raw metals. The recycler also produces some energium from time to time, so good it's in close proximity, right? Even though we haven't talked about the steel plates the metal refinery produces yet, I think you get the idea. Ultimately, when it comes to the distribution of energy cells, one thing becomes clear: we can't cramp everything in one space. Those energy cells need to be distributed to the advanced assembler, your turrets, and for recharging your robot base. So we will have to work with the minimal rule set and also adjust our production. I think you understood that I tried to put together what kind of belongs together because of shared resources. One thing you should definitely separate is the botany area along with the composting and water collection and also the autopsy table to turn monsters and humans into monster and human meat. To grow food, your grow beds need water, fertilizer and CO2 in the atmosphere, and they will produce the stuff you selected and some biomatter. The composters though can turn this biomatter into partially a bit of fertilizer, some carbon and also a bit of water. The monster and human meat returns lots of water, carbon and raw chemicals. The carbon we need for our CO2 producer, everything excess we can put over into the industry area, metal refinery, and the raw chemicals we could deliver to the chemical refinery, which then could produce more fertilizer for us. So that's kind of a closed loop again, and that's also where we want to put the water collection, because water is needed in the botany area and pretty much not that much everywhere else on the ship. Regarding the placement of your industry area, please also consider that if a fire should occur or something like that, that you probably want to be able to vent the entire atmosphere out of the industry area without affecting the rest of your ship. Botany should be placed around a central composting area, and since grow beds generate comfort, it's not bad to mix them up with the living area. Solar panels are ideally placed next to the hull, so the outer periphery, because they don't need any deliveries. Before you can start a new game, you have to roll your crew. You would be well advised to make sure your crew has a level 3 in all areas overall. But also make sure you do not just have one level 3 in any of them as well, at least some level 2s should be around. Depending on your crew size, this can become pretty difficult, so personally I prefer to have functional characters. Functional characters depend on their traits. Ignore the occupation before the apocalypse, that's just backstory. Check the trait and then think of what this trait would be good for. For example, if this is supposed to be a combat guy and then has low accuracy and no weapon skill, bad idea. For example, if you get a bloodlust guy and he has no weapon skill, he can't do what makes him really happy. If you have, for example, somebody who has a hardworking trait, but then no industry, no botany and no research skill, that's a waste of the trait. Stuff like that, check for those and then decide whether the skill set fits to the trait or not. If you have further questions, please leave them in the comments. In the bottom right you find the promised power tutorial. I added some Spacehaven playlists in the top right in the cards. Thank you for commenting, liking and subscribing, and we see each other next time. Bye!